Anger on the streets in Myanmar after democracy icon Aung San Suu Kyi is handed a guilty verdict. Behind closed doors, the military, which seized power 10 months ago, sentenced her to 4 years for inciting dissent and flouting COVID rules during last year's elections. Just 2 of the nearly dozen charges against the democratically elected leader, prompting widespread international condemnation.
The UN High Commissioner for Human Rights deeply deplores the conviction and sentencing of Aung San Suu Kyi on these offences. I mean, the trial was a sham trial by a military-controlled court without due regard for the fair trial obligations of Myanmar.
Hours after the sentencing, a partial pardon by the Commander-in-Chief announced on state television, reducing Aung San Suu Kyi's sentence from 4 years to 2.
It's clear that they're going to use any tactics that they want with impunity, as they have before, to hold her in detention. And this is simply to make sure that the Myanmar population continue to not rally around her.
But they are rallying around her. They may no longer be gathering on the streets in their thousands after they were met with bullets. But the new flash mob-style protests which have emerged can be just as deadly. On Sunday, at least 5 more names were added to the list of 1,300 people killed by the junta when security forces drove a vehicle into a small protest before beating and shooting demonstrators. For many people in Myanmar, the situation is untenable. GDP is expected to contract by 18% in 2021 as a civil disobedience movement, slumping foreign investment and the pandemic take their toll. The UN warns that more than half of the population will be living in poverty by 2022.
It's clear that Myanmar people are suffering, but they haven't given up protesting against the junta, and they don't want the junta.
Desperate for a return to normality, people are increasingly taking up arms against the junta, forming militias and engaging in guerrilla attacks. In response, the military has vowed to crush opposition, raising concerns of another brutal crackdown like the one acted out against the Rohingya Muslims in 2017.
So I cannot really predict the extent and the amount of human suffering it will cause. And also, of course, it will also destabilize the region. Myanmar shares borders with China, Thailand, India, and Bangladesh. So there's a lot of concerns for these neighboring countries as well, because if the military continues to target the civilian populations, it'll be such a huge refugee crisis in the region.
Activists say international sanctions against the ruling generals do not go far enough, and regional bloc ASEAN is not likely to hold them to account, with the Cambodia Prime Minister meeting with the junta's foreign minister on Tuesday. But as elected leaders are locked up and protesters are shot in the streets, any return to civilian rule in Myanmar looks far out of reach for now. Rick Yi and Rick Glauert for TaiwanPlus.